Theresa here from wingsflighthealingarts.com, here with an energy update. So this one's a little bit different from recent ones. We happen to have one particular being of light who has a lot to say here. Some of you have maybe picked up on and noticed, of course, it's kind of ironic that it's Easter and today is, somebody brought to my attention, thank you to the person who did that, who let me know today's Passover. So it's very, very appropriate that Jesus's energy is here, but that is who it is that is delivering a large portion of this message. So there's been breadcrumb trails over the past couple of months, and for the beginning of the year into now, it's just kind of come to a head right now. Jesus first came to me in the physical it was late July of 2015, and that's in the physical. Now, I've been hearing these beings of light for a long time, the angels and the ascended masters and the Elohim, and I'm used to that, but I hadn't seen them in person for a long time because I kept that at bay. So when he showed up unannounced, I was like, oh, Jesus, you're short. First thing you say to Jesus. So anyway, that's another story for another time. But he said, hey, I'm going to be working with you a little bit more. Just want to let you know about that. And so then he was talking to me, and he came back around in May of last year, and he said, we're going to start putting some messages out. Now's kind of your time for that. And so what he mentioned to me about was, trying to remember the first thing that he mentioned to me. He said, oh, did you know? He said, because you specialize in understanding the balance between the masculine and the feminine within yourself, and especially with twins, like you've understood it with yourself, you've understood it, how it works between twins. He said, you know how sometimes the masculine is embodied in a feminine body, and the feminine energy is embodied in a masculine body? And I said, sure. He said, well, and this is something that's mentioned in one of my earlier videos. If you've been there, if you've gone and looked at some of the older ones, which kind of make me cringe. When you watch how you film over a period of time, it's like, oh, yikes, I don't know if I can watch myself, but the information is there for those of you that have watched it, and my face is itchy. So one of the things that he mentioned was, he said, did you know that I was the feminine embodied, and Mary Magdalene was, is his twin, was the feminine embodied? And he said, look back at the behavior of, if you understand twins and the behavior when they're coming, into balance, and they're calling like an energetic harmonic convergence within, that can be, you guys know that can be a little bit rocky and stormy. And it brings up all of your blocks to unconditional love. He said, well, that's who he was, and that's who she was. And the story goes back to tell, he said, ever since the times of Atlantis, the planet has really been experiencing power struggles. That was, certain individuals are seen as having more power, certain individuals are seen as having less power. So the majority of people on the planet were experiencing a sense of powerlessness in one way or another. And so it was like an abuse of, or it definitely was an abuse of the patriarchal role, abuse of the masculine power, which is part of the blue ray of light. So a lot of these have been blue ray lessons, and a large number of the souls here have been blue rays experiencing powerlessness and, power on all the power lessons that there are. He said, we took a look. Now, I was part of a big council that helped create the soul contract for Jesus when he came on the planet. This is something that I remember. Some of us that were involved in that incarnated with him. And he said, you remember when that happened? And I said, yeah. And he said, part of that was because we took a look at whether or not we were going to have a feminine, the feminine energy in a feminine body to come down and help challenge the masculine patriarchy, and we realized they would chant that when we were taking a look at it, the collective would most likely, the female would not have lived long. I will say that. So what ended up happening is they said, okay, let's place the feminine in a masculine body. So it's still a feminine role. And so essentially it would be the first time. Jesus was the first one to come in and really challenge the patriarchal role and to show it. He was the first one to embody like feminine power, and which was new on the planet, and people see him as a little bit different and don't necessarily understand his role in what it was to work in the realm of personal power, because they're used to him being associated with Christ consciousness, with joy, with wisdom, and these sorts of things, because Jesus is technically from the second ray of light, which is the yellow light, which embodies those things. So that was what he was explaining, and he has been talking to me about what he's been so loud, and when they're really passionate about what it is. Jesus has been really quiet and calm, but up until like the past few weeks, he's really had a lot to say. A lot like Saint Germain will do and I've seen Mikael do it. The Ascended Masters get really passionate about this sort of things. They have a certain tone that they'll use, which is just like powerful, and you will listen to me, and I am your parent. You know when you're in trouble a little bit and you're and you're not really listening as a toddler and kind of stubborn, and your parents come through and it's like, don't touch the hot stove, like stay away from that. And as a collective, so anyway, that's kind of the tone that he's using, but he's been coming forward and helping me to understand this is what the second coming of Christ is. It's not him in a body, it's him ushering, all of humanity into this balance of power in terms of the feminine discovering her power again. And it's not about taking power from somebody else or somebody having taken it from you. Nobody can ever take it from you. It's just something that you feel it and you realize it, and you realize that you already have it. Nobody can ever take it from you. It's like, well, there's nobody to fight. There's no competition here. It's all like, oh, I've had it all along. I've just been experiencing, this paradigm. And so there's a gigantic paradigm shift happening on the planet. That's why they've been talking so largely about, if you've been watching my Cards of the Day videos, they've been talking a large part about how there's breakthroughs in love, breakthroughs on the planet in terms of relationships, love relationships, how we're relating to ourselves and all of that. I've been saying it for a long time. 2017 is the year of stepping into your power as a group, consciousness. And something else that he mentioned, he's like, this isn't just women's power or, any special group. Of course, that's the first layer. We've got certain groups that are stating, okay, I'm stepping into my power. He's showing me group collectives in a sphere, because spheres are sacred geometry representing unity, that are being activated at different times. And so that he helps me I'm here to help, shift certain groups of people at certain times on the planet. And so he's like, even though there's those groups and they're saying, oh, it's women's power, or it's this rights, or this over here, that's certain layers of separation still being existed or experienced. And so he's like, it's going to raise above that, and a certain level above that will be experiencing power as a whole, and not just the masculine and not just the feminine, because really the masculine hasn't been empowered either, because it's been an abuse of the masculine power, and we're going to get into that in a minute and what exactly that looks like. Okay, so some of you have felt a big shift towards the end of last year. I want to say it was in November. the resonance of the planet had shot up to 40. Now, it had been common to be around like 7 or 10 for quite some time, but it shot up to 40, like it was 38 and 40, and that amount of light, that height of a frequency will come in and it shakes things up, because it's like when you work with the angelic rays of light like I do, it's going to come in and it's going to break up the energy where there's blocks, where spaces, where there's opportunities for the light to come in and infiltrate. Okay, so this past weekend, perfect that this is perfect timing, especially since Jesus is here and assisting. And he's mentioning some of you are going to be uncomfortable with me saying the word Jesus so much, and it's asking some of you to take a look at your relationship with him, and it's going to challenge you a little bit about forgiving what Christianity has done to him, what Christianity has defined him as, what Christianity, all of those things are coming up for you to take a look at, because he wants to help. And it's not about being Christian or being religious. It's just ask him, because that's what he's here to help, is help like people understand what their personal power is. So since we shot up to 90 this past weekend, this has sparked a gigantic activation on the planet, and that level of frequency just shakes things up. The dust, gets kicked up. Some of the, the shadowy stuff is happening. So for me personally, how I react when the levels raise is I have this unbelievable clarity that comes through. And some of you may be experiencing that. Other people feel, other effects, like sort of like the solar flares. You may feel flu-like, or you may have a bunch of stuff like just feel yucky and it's too much. You may feel overwhelmed by it. But that's okay. We all experience different things. I personally love it when the frequency rises, because I'm like, oh yes, because here we go. And he's talking about, this is what his second coming is him helping people step into their power, which is ironically a Blu-ray roll, okay? But because he has helped shift the role of the feminine, that's what he's back here for. He's like, I started it, I was the spark, and now I'm back to help see the collective do this together. Yeah, so sorry, I'm going through my notes here because he had a lot to say, and sometimes it's just like he'll come through in the middle of the day and say, okay, get to your computer. I'm going, all right, and then it's just this, he opens the floodgates of things that he wants to say. So we've also been talking about how there's a balancing of the masculine and the feminine energies. My twins know about this. They understand that there's a balancing between the masculine and feminine, not only within them, but also within, their relation to others, particularly in a romantic relationship. How this ends up playing out. Some people say, well, how do I know what that feels like? If you've played a role of being mostly masculine in your life and you are a feminine embodiment, you are going to step more into a receiving role. And it'll be an ebb and a flow of, okay, now I know I'm in my masculine, now I know I'm in my feminine, and it's just this flow, and you and your other partner, whether you're a twin or whoever it is that you're with, you'll both ebb and flow through that. And it's the same thing that he has been talking about leadership. Sometimes you lead and sometimes you follow, and there's this dance. It's like both partners are getting their needs met, and it's not in a codependent way, but that's just what relationships are when they're a co-creation. You both have needs, and your most healthy relationships will have not just one person's needs getting met, not just one person constantly leading, because that's the old paradigm where the masculine only leads and the feminine only receives. It's not like that. It's an ebb and flow now. That's why you're starting to see people on the planet that look masculine or feminine, and you look at them and you're not necessarily sure how to tell. Those people come in with a balance inherently of the masculine and feminine within themselves. okay? You can also look very feminine and have that balance as well, or be very masculine looking and have that as well. It's just more obvious with those that have that physicality where you see them balanced. It's sort of like, they're reminding me of Pat of Saturday Night Live, if you remember from the late 80s and early 90s. Sorry, my nose always runs when I start discussing this stuff. So how to tell when you're balancing the masculine and feminine. The easiest way to do this is when you're taking a look at your giving and receiving, your leading and your following. It's not constantly balanced, but it's just it's a flow, and you know when you're receiving and you know when you're giving, and it's not constantly giving or constantly receiving. And so some of you have a hard time with receiving right now, and some of you have a hard time with giving. And as you work with it and you get comfortable with these energies, that's when you know that you're coming into balance with the masculine and feminine within you. And then that plays out between it's not only just yourself, like, am I comfortable receiving love from, the divine and receiving my abundance and that sort of thing, versus giving and receiving. It happens first, your foundation is with yourself and source, but also between you and, your relationships. So for a large part, people have had a hard time with receiving because their feminine side has been blocked. A lot of the feminine has had to step into a masculine role in this world. It's something that we've been forced to do, and some of us didn't have a masculine role, so ended up stepping into that and got comfortable with it for a while. But now there's a big movement. Like, there's some women that are in the corporate world that have been playing a masculine role that are stating, I'm really ready to explore more of my feminine side. And so, that's just kind of the way it works. And some of the men are like, wow, I've been giving too much, or I've been receiving too much, and I think I'm just ready to receive more love, or I'm ready to give more love or give more support and that sort of thing. So, because there's some masculine that I've been watching who've been used to receiving their whole life and have been around women for a very long time and uncomfortable being around men. And so their masculine's been repressed. It's very true. This happens. I know a couple personally who have been doing that, and they'll spend a lot of time around a woman. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Some women have been spending time around a bunch of men. Totally fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you're feeling you want something more, it's because that's coming back into balance, okay? Jesus has been the loudest he has ever been. I don't quite know how to explain it to you, but those of you who hear them will know what I'm talking about. And sometimes he will just come through, and it's this intensity that comes through, and it's like, here you go. And it's not about going to church. He's just like, get to know me. I'm here to help you. Please ask. It's not about becoming a born-again Christian. It's not about going to church. What he has been stating, because there's a few people that have misinterpreted his messages, it's not about going to church. It's not about becoming a Christian again. It's about, if that's what works for you, keep that connection. Whatever works for you, so that you are connecting to source and self-love, that's what he wants. And he asks you to think positively, because even though if you are one person, even if you're one drop in the ocean, you're still part of the ocean, and you still are important, and what you have to say and what you think matters. You're going to affect the rest of the ocean just by being the one that's positive, and I guarantee you're not. But there's kind of a last-ditch effort, and people are feeling the fluctuation in relationships and the last-minute abuse of power, abuse of masculine power. They're asking you, hold space. Don't fall for the example that's happening on the planet. You can step into fear, or you can choose love, and that is what Jesus is talking about. And just stating, I choose love. I choose love. I embody love. I am love. Those are the sorts of things. And here's the other thing about giving and receiving too. And he's been talking about limits about this, because sometimes people have said, okay, people are over giving and then expecting something in return, and that has created some situations where people are upset. What he's asking you to do in balance of giving and receiving as well is give as much as you feel comfortable with without expecting something in return, because then what happens is this stops the pattern of anger and the criticism and any resentment that you're not getting what you want. He's talking about communication, becoming more compassionate. Many of you, he is activating right now the compassion within you. There are leaders coming online in the world in terms of, and just being activated in terms of compassionate, authentic communication. And as you get comfortable becoming a more authentic communicator, sometimes that's messy. Sometimes you're like a bull in a china shop. Sometimes he wants to show you a way to communicate in a way that is more empowered. You have more control over, in your relationships, he's mentioning, pay attention to when you're communicating. If you show up for something with an open heart and being a compassionate, open, authentic communicator, this is going to set the tone. This is true leadership. And the other person will mirror that. So you're holding space for that. Versus out of fear of not getting what you want, being demanding and domineering and controlling. And that is the abuse of masculine power and communication. Okay? So you're gonna get more out of it, and so will the other person, because you are giving them the permission to be a compassionate, open, authentic communicator as well. Okay? That's how you lead. So he's taken us more into leadership versus following. Again, like the abuse of power, and this comes from fears, and this is something I specialize in, is being able to hear where your fears are and why you're communicating in this domineering way. Because, are you forcing your will, and are you also, if you're following, he wants you to ask, because there's a balance between leading and following, and it's an ebb and a flow in relationships, and knowing when you're following and when you're leading. And I'll tell you, that's hard sometimes, but that's kind of what's happening on the planet right now. And if you're following, he's asking you, are you asking for your needs to be met? Or are you demanding them? Because if there's a balance between that, you're both prioritizing the relationship as well. That's something else he's mentioning as well that's important, is if relationships are not prioritizing each other, then it isn't going to work. This is playing out on a world stage, and some of you are very, very aware of that. And so those of you that are meant to lead, and I didn't fully understand this when I think Lee Harris was the first one that was really talking about this back in July of last year, and I didn't realize to what degree. So go check his work out, because he's amazing, and he's talking about how there's some activations happening as well. I think you'd really enjoy his work. Also, Jesus is talking about we are the master of our destinies. I feel like that's something that we've been talking about here, and coming online and understanding that we have the power to have anything that we want. We can, fate's out of the window. If you want to learn how to properly manifest and take control of that, get in touch with me, because we're starting to manifest instantly and rapidly. And luckily, there's a window of time between what you think and what is manifesting, and you can switch all that by the way that you think. Spend 5 minutes a day thinking about what you want, and just let it go. Say, okay, I've said what I want, and here we go. Also, he's touching base on passive aggressiveness. You know how we were talking about if you're not getting your needs met, and there's a stigma with passive aggressiveness that I think is misunderstood. And if people got to the heart of it, they would have a lot more compassion for people that are passive aggressive. Instead of judging the passive aggressiveness, try to get curious and understand why somebody is like that. It can be hard when there's that intensity of emotion. But if you've been following too long and you're not asking for your needs and not getting your needs met, and you feel that lack of balance in any area, communication, leading, following, giving, receiving, this is where some of the talks about narcissism versus, empathy and this sort of thing. When the basis of it, people behave in this way because they've had to repress their communication. This has been a pattern. This is ancestral, and it's about like the feminine not able to speak, and sometimes the masculine. So, you've got these needs and you're just, passively following along, and then all of a sudden you explode. So this is coming up a lot, and this is why, as you balance the inner masculine and feminine, passive aggressiveness on the planet is gonna ease. It may come up, it may ease out, like as you get used to it. So Jesus says he's here to support you. Please call on him. This isn't like, I'm not a Jesus preacher. I never thought that I would be up here discussing him, because for such a long time I pushed him away because of, especially him, more so than any of the beings of light, because of my having lived during the times of Jesus and having known him personally. I didn't like what happened to him. I didn't like what humanity did, and I saw him as disempowered until I realized it played a part of the role. And he came to me and we got to hang out, and I'm like, okay, I understand this differently now. And it's different to have a relationship with him versus being Christian. And if you need help understanding that, comment below and let's discuss it, because there is a difference. And if it's bringing up your issues around Christianity, you're welcome. Like, he's all about the forgiveness right now. That's also working with the seventh ray of light. He says that your connection to love is the greatest connection you will ever make in your life. And so there's a mantra that he's giving me. He says, I ensure my relationships are healthy and that each person's needs are met. Okay? Doesn't mean that you're responsible for somebody else's needs. It just sets the intention that both people's needs are met, that it is a balanced and fair relationship, and that everybody's happy, because that's what true balance is. And it's an ebb and a flow. It's not always 50-50. If you need help with any of these topics, if you want help shifting, if you're feeling challenged, come talk to me. Let's work one-on-one. And I'm super, super happy that you are here. These energy updates are going to remain free. They are here for your assistance. I'm happy to get to deliver these messages. These are like the overflow message, like the overview message. If you need something more concentrated, that's what the 3 cards of the day are. So 3 cards for 3 days. Those come individually on my website if you want to purchase them, or through a membership if you'd like. They've asked me to go on membership route. This is apparently the way things are going to start going in the future. So they're stating get used to that idea. I know it's new. I know you're used to getting it for free, but part of that giving and receiving is I'm having to ask for, to receive for what it is I'm putting out. There isn't anybody else out there that's teaching in this way about the rays of light and about the beings of light. And Jesus came through really strongly with the recent Angelic Healing webinar. That is still up if you want to get in. I can give you access to the Facebook group and you can experience the healing yourself. He was also through with the money blocks. This is why he was talking. This is healing your money blocks. This is about also deeper, at a deeper level. It's about healing the divine feminine. So if that's something that, and the receiving mechanisms, if that resonates with you, you can purchase it. I can get you into the Facebook group or send you the video or the audio so that you can listen to it and help heal that, okay? Those healings are timeless. It doesn't matter if you were live. It doesn't matter if you purchase them today, but that's what I'm here for. Okay, so I'm sending you lots of love. I'm super, super excited to get to put this out, and I hope it resonates for you. And they're stating, Jesus is saying, don't hate the Christians, and anybody can call on him. You don't have to be Christian or religious in any kind of way. All right, so thank you for being here. Sending you lots of love. Okay, bye.